we work with people, we work with communities. It's hard to talk about these things when it's real lives. Yeah? We're not businesses where it's just about the bottom line. We have to make the books balance. That's a harsh reality, but we do it because of people. That's one of our last team photos. I started the charity back in 2013, so when it was registered. We had our first meeting about 2012. I never imagined in 2025 I'd be standing talking to you about having to make 24 people redundant. That wasn't what we set out to do. At time of closing, we had about 60 volunteers. We'd often have about 300 with us during the space of a year. Volunteers, interns, students on placement. You'll all be familiar with these kind of arrangements. One of the things that really struck me, I'll come on to some of the sort of details of how we ended up ceasing to operate, but one of the things that really struck me was we were having conversations with people, their jobs are at risk, and one of the first things that staff and volunteers were saying was, but what about the people that we're supporting? What about them? And I suppose that was kind of the driving force for me to kind of go, we have to end. If we have to end, then we have to end the best way we possibly can for those people. So that's, I'll say, a little bit of our story. It's about people. It's still difficult. It still hurts to kind of talk about these things. And it wouldn't be right if these conversations Julianne was talking about, if they weren't difficult. And it's like, that's why they're difficult, because it's about real people. 24 mortgages, families. I'm pleased to say that of the 24 people, almost everybody's now got a job, which is great news. I was actually WhatsApping someone this morning, just putting an offer on a house. So it's like, life does move on for people as well. And I think it's important to know that as well, that particularly the last person left in the middle of December, so we're now almost sort of 6 months on, and it is quite remarkable how actually the world and people do move on. So it feels awful at the time, it is awful at the time, still is, but life does move on. This was the moment when the road ran out for us. So we set up the charity back in 2013. We had 3 main areas of work. One was to support children on the move from primary to secondary school, P7, S1. The other was to work with people to help them to be digitally included. You all remember before COVID? Well, I remember before COVID, talking to people about digital inclusion, and the tumbleweed used to go down the... because no one really understood what it meant not to have a computer, not to have the data, not to have the skills and the confidence to be online. And then COVID happened, and the whole world woke up. You could say we were in the right place at the right time. Maybe COVID was part of our downfall, actually, in hindsight, because we trebled in size very, very quickly. We've got additional funding. We were on a hot topic. We supported thousands and thousands of people through the COVID and after COVID as well around digital inclusion work. So you can see how the black line is our income. All very healthy. That's where you want your black line, isn't it? Just above your expenditure line. Every single year for 9 years, we created a surplus. So I like to think we were good stewards. We'd put away for a rainy day. We just didn't know it was going to absolutely pour. And then the line crosses. So I guess that was the kind of early warning. I have to say that I'm an optimist. I'm a glass half full person. I've said this lots of times to people, funding is really difficult to get, but we'd always just got it. We always just worked a bit later at night. We worked that weekend. We put in a few more applications. We made them, a bit more attractive. We, engaged with funders. And then all of a sudden, we found that work, it just wasn't working anymore. When we came to winding up the charity, we'd had 26 consecutive funding applications that have been unsuccessful. Literally 26 in a row. It's like we got to 17, and you kind of think, well, What's that thing about when you invest money? Past performance is no judge of the future. You kind of think, well, if the last 17 haven't been successful, what is it we're going to do different that we are going to have some success going forward? If out of those 25, 26, we'd had 2, 3 or 4 that had been successful, we would have sailed on. But that didn't happen. So the early warning sign was there. We had a year of using some of our reserves, and then we'd set our budgets like we all do. Set our budgets. We always had set a budget where we had to raise some money within the year, and we'd always done it. And I can remember our board kind of being quite, well, that's what we always do, and we've done that for 9 straight years, and we've always had a surplus at the end of it. But then all of a sudden, the world changed, and that was the harsh reality for us. When we realised that there wasn't much option but to close, not much option, there wasn't an option but to close. So we then were focused on, the legacy. Let's end the best way we possibly can, and let's, wherever we can, pass forward the assets we do have left, the knowledge, the expertise, the networks. Let's pass the baton so that people can continue to take the work forward. But you can only do that if you're still solvent. And that was I can remember the board meeting where we decided that was it. We were going to close. Now, I think we could have continued. I know we could have continued at that point. I think a lot of charities, a lot of third sector organisations would probably have kept going. You can bury your head in the sand. You can think, we had 17 no's, but surely the next one will be a yes. Surely we'll get 2 or 3 successful applications. It'll be all right. But we took the decision early on that wasn't how it looked like it was going to pan out. So let's decide to close the charity down in an orderly, respectful manner, thinking about the people that we're supporting, thinking about our staff, our volunteers, the communities that we work in, the networks we've built up, the stakeholders we've got. Let's end with them really, really well. And you can only do that if you're solvent. I want to really accentuate that. You can only do that if you're solvent. If you're insolvent, it's taken out of your hands. I didn't have to go down that road, so I don't know much about it, other than it's taken out of your hands. There's insolvency practitioners and lawyers, and Companies House gets involved, and Oscar gets involved, and as for the charity, doing anything, that gets kind of frozen, put on ice. Our work is emotional, so it's hard then to make rational decisions, isn't it? But we have to try and do that, and I think it's just about I think one way for us to make those rational decisions was to recognise the emotions, not to ignore them, but to recognise them. I'll give you one kind of anecdote, one sort of story, a voice I can hear in my head in terms of one of our board members as this started to kind of unfold. And it was what she was saying was, but we've operated in this way for years. It's always kind of worked. Why can't we just keep doing the same thing? And this was at the point of, those lines had crossed. We'd started to dip into our reserves. I'm starting to think about, is there ways of us partnering with other organisations, collaborations, mergers. I had quite lengthy conversations with a couple of charities. But the board, and I suppose the staff team, the whole, we'd always just made things work. So it's harder to change that story, to change that narrative. And it didn't happen quick enough. I've made the point about doing the right thing by our beneficiaries. Okay, that's just another way of saying, the people that we support, the communities that we work in. That desire to have a lasting legacy, to honour all the work that had that had happened. Nothing that could take that away. We'd supported thousands of children. We'd worked in 50 schools across Edinburgh, East and Mid Lothian. We'd given out 5,000 devices during COVID, digital devices. I could go on. With a canal boat, that's another story. We've given hundreds of people trips up and down the Union Canal. Nothing can take that away. And again, if you're faced with the decision of having to, stop a project or stop an organisation or wind up, it's like you can't eradicate the past. We need to be proud of that and honour that. So that was part of our legacy work. And all those people, I say, that have been involved. I think when we came to wind up the charity, we were at staff number 77. So I say there was 24 at the end, but we'd had 77 people over that time, and they were all part of that story. The aiming for a soft landing, I'd say, talking about doing the right thing by people and the communities that we worked in. When you start to go down the road of winding up a charity, there's lots of regulations. Oscar have a say. We're not a registered company, so I don't know much about Companies House. Is that a good thing? Maybe. I'm not sure. It's one less complication. We just have been dealing with Oscar. There's loads on the Oscar website. There's loads on the SCVO website. There weren't things I'd ever read, though, because I didn't need to. Then you go to Google or ChatGPT and you start putting in words like, how do I wind up a charity? And all of a sudden, all these links are there. So the information is out there. But it's quite complicated. We were always talked about ourselves as an innovative charity. Social innovation was our thing. I've spoken about us delivering services in schools, our digital work, but our real driving purpose was to actually change the system. So as well as that, we had research projects, we did lots of consultations, and really wanted to change things and for things to be different. And when you're faced with winding up a charity, all of a sudden those kind of options and choices are taken away from you. I'm really proud of our board. I was actually talking to my chair on Monday, and we were reflecting how it's probably the most stable board we've had over the last few years. That the 9 people that were on our board when we started the winding up process, they're still on our board. And we met just last week. Our final meeting will probably be in June. I think that's a real statement that all 9 of them have stuck in there and have seen it through. But we all know a lot about boards. They're really, really important. You need that range of skills. You need that range of time, the questioning. Yes, they can be annoying at times. It's like, I just want to get this thing done. And you're asking me all these questions. When it comes to winding up a charity, you really need a good board that asks loads of questions, looks under every rock, and points out, what about this, what about that? Having that range of skills is really important. Having a board where everyone's voices is heard is really important. We've had, in the time of the charity from 2013 to now, I've had 3 chairs, which I think is not too bad. We've only had 3. And our chair has always been really, really good at making sure that it's not just the loud voices in the room that get their opinion across. We kind of really make a point sometimes of stopping and going around the room and getting everyone to contribute their thoughts, their ideas, their questions, because they're all valid, they're all really important. And often, there's that one thing that someone says, which is the daft question, and everyone goes, actually, you've hit it. So it's really important that we make sure our boards have that really good communication and keep that flowing. I say our volunteers, interns, placement students, we worked really hard to place them with other organisations where we could. So a lot of our work was around digital inclusion. We ran lots of groups around the city, and a lot of those volunteers just moved over to support those other organisations. We have 2 PhD studies. I mentioned one around our school transitions, the others around our digital inclusion work, and we've supported them as well, and they will continue to move forward and be able to complete their studies with the university, with other organisations. As I say, our staff team, they move forward. Most of them have now got jobs, and we're continuing to put out just kind of good news pieces. We've got a couple of podcasts that are in the edited suite just now. This is being filmed as well, so really, really keen just to share our story and our lessons learned.